So I'll wait, I won't cry. It's the story of my life, and I will capture to recapture every moment of our lives. I'll be here, I'll be strong. I won't wish the whole night long for me alone, to be alone. All I want is just for you to be here again.
My office was a few blocks away from the World Trade Center, and I had one of the best vistas in all of New York City. The way my office was set up, my desk faced west. I had a large picture window next to me, and my phone was behind my desk chair. Out of this window, you could look 33 stories down at the Staten Island Ferry coming in and out several times a day. Off to the right was the Statue of Liberty. Ahead of me, Governor's Island. Further up a little bit, the Verrazano Narrows Bridge connecting Brooklyn and Staten Island. And on the far horizon, New Jersey, where it juts out to form the Jersey Shore, and where my high-speed ferry went in and out. I was feeling pretty upbeat the morning of September 11. I got to my office. I was eating a bagel, drinking some water, and my phone rang. It was Bonnie. She said, "Have you seen it?" I said, "Seen what?" "A plane has hit the World Trade Center." I said, "No." Had I not been on the phone with Bonnie, I undoubtedly would have been horrified to see the second plane coming towards my building, going right by on its way to the South Tower. Instead, I hung up my phone, and a few seconds later, I heard the explosion. And then a few seconds later, the mailroom guys, the most laid-back people in our building, came running down the corridors, yelling for us to get out of the building. And when I looked down to get my bagel and water, they popped their head back in and said, "Now." And I ran to the elevator bank, where I saw other members of the utility team. They had been watching the North Tower burning when the second plane hit the South Tower. They had seen that horror live. I went downstairs, found myself among thousands of milling workers. I shoved my bagel and water into my pockets, went around to Battery Park, where I was to see the first surreal scene of the several I would see that day. While almost everyone in the park was looking up at the two towers burning, I'm embarrassed to say there were a few fools who were joking and laughing and playing the slap hands game, treating this like some kind of glorified false alarm. I knew I wanted to get away from them, but even that can't explain what I did next. I started walking my exercise route towards the World Trade Center when everyone else was going the other way. Oh, I have reasons, none of which stand up to much scrutiny. See, my younger brother worked right across from the World Trade Center in the World Financial Center. And as I walked, I tried to call him, but there was no cell service to be had. Or maybe it was just my tendency to follow fire trucks to see where the action was. Years before, when I lived in suburban DC, I had tried to become a volunteer firefighter. But the fire chief told me I wasn't eligible because I didn't have 20/40 uncorrected vision. And then he added, like it makes a difference. Once you go into the smoke, you can't see a damn thing. But whatever the reason, I started up West Street expecting police crowd control to stop me at any moment. But there were no police out. What stopped me was when I got a block below the World Trade Center and there were body parts in the intersection. And a little further up was a burning jet engine. There was one other guy on the street with a baseball cap and a radio. And he said, "The Pentagon's been hit." And I said, "We're under attack." And then the two of us just watched the carnage in silence. Except when a National Guardsman came driving up and into the intersection, and the two of us yelled out, "Hey, buddy, you're hitting body parts." But he couldn't hear us and drove on. I think everyone watching the two towers burning thought that maybe the tops of the buildings might keel over like a church steeple falling, but I don't think anyone could envision what was about to occur. The South Tower, the second one hit, almost imperceptibly began to twist, and I could hear a creaking noise growing into a roar, not unlike when you're in a subway station and a train comes barreling out of the tunnel, does not stop in your station, and blows by you. I felt the vibration, I could hear the noise, and suddenly I knew I had to run. And I thank God that my leg held up, because as I ran, pebbles were hitting me in the back, and I wouldn't know until the next day that each one had left a bruise. But I got to the corner of Rector Place, and I ducked behind the building, and I was breathing heavy, but I was happy because now I'd be safe. But a moment later, I saw dust and ash fly down the intersection, and a few seconds later, the gray cloud covered me. Stunned, I yelled at myself, "You've really done it now." People asked me what I thought at that moment, and I could tell you like it was yesterday. First, I thought of the Caribbean island of Montserrat, where volcanic dust had covered the villagers, and they immediately stopped breathing and died. I expected that would be happening to me. When it didn't, I next thought of my mother across the river in a coma in a hospital, and that I would predecease my mother. And then I thought of my kids, that I wouldn't see them again, and my wife would be raising them alone. And I decided at that moment I would do whatever I had to do to survive, including going the 2 blocks to the Hudson River and jumping in if I had to. And I started down Rector Place seeking refuge. I went to the first building on the right, and the doors were open. And as I got there, a black man, now gray, was going in, and I was a white man, now gray. We went in together, but it was filled with gray dust. I figured they must have had doors and windows open to the north, and when the South Tower came down, the gray cloud had suffused itself through the building, creating the equivalent of a hazy construction site. And the two of us left together, and my friend said, "Bring your shirt up and breathe through the fabric," which I did. We went to the next building, it was locked, and the next building was locked. Then we got to the cross street, where I was to see the next surreal scene of the day. The gray had lifted a little. The street lights had come on, but in the dust, they looked like shimmering gas lamps. Not unlike you were looking at an 1880s Currier and Ives print of a beautiful street scene enveloped in fog. But no time for nostalgia. A tough decision soon to be made, with the Hudson River 1 block away. We went to the final building before the river, and I went up to the revolving door, and I pushed it, and it turned. They had let us in. We joined the group of residents being led down to the basement, actually a changing room for the doormen, with a bathroom and a color TV with MSNBC on. You could see the horror of the North Tower burning. Say what you will about disaster films with their hackneyed plots and unrealistic characters, the assembled group around me would have made Hollywood proud. There was a pregnant woman, several babies, a woman with a dog, a German Shepherd. The dog looked nice, but then the woman said to us, "Don't put your hand near its head. It doesn't like to be petted." There were two young ladies, J.P. Morgan trainees up from Texas for a month of orientation before being reassigned back to Dallas and Houston. And they told the assembled group we were really enjoying our time in New York until today. Then there was a female construction worker in a hard hat and a luminescent vest, a policeman by the door, my gray friend, and myself. We all helped each other. I went to the bathroom and washed up, and then my half-eaten bagel went to feed the baby. My water bottle went to the pregnant woman. We didn't talk much. We mostly were fixed on the TV screen of the North Tower burning. And then, having seen the unimaginable a mere 29 minutes before, I wasn't surprised when on the TV we saw the North Tower start coming down and imploding upon itself. A few beats later, the shook and the lights went out. And for the first time since we joined together, the babies started crying. And then out of the darkness, I heard my gray friend start singing, "Twinkle, twinkle, little star." And we all joined in, "How I wonder what you are." And to our amazement, we got the babies to stop crying, which was good, because it didn't really hit us then. But if we knew what was going on just a few blocks away, I think we probably would have joined the babies in crying, except I'm not sure we would have ever been able to stop.
Shout out of the dark into the mountains. It makes me feel like everything I need to find I never will. Like the wild man's call to surrender. It's like a pain that hits me in between the eyes. So I'll wait, I won't cry. It's the story of my life, and I will capture to recapture every moment of our lives. I'll be here, I'll be strong. I won't wish the whole night long for me alone to be alone. All I want is just for you to be here again.
We waited in the dark a while longer, and then a couple of us went upstairs having no idea what we would find. To our great surprise, it was a return to a beautiful sunny day, with the only difference, the dust and the ash had made the ground look like a beautiful snowfield. So we sent word back down to everyone that all appears to look okay up here. Then my cell phone still wasn't working, so I set off to go back towards my office. I had only gone a block or two when a policeman called out after me, "There's a gas leak over here, get on that boat." The police had commandeered a tugboat. With all that I had seen that morning, I was taking no chances. I got on the boat, I put on a hard hat, I went around the tugboat so that the superstructure of the tug would protect me in case the gas line were to explode. And as I hunched against the wall of the boat, I said, "Let's go, let's go, let's go," and then the tug took off and took me across the Hudson River to Liberty State Park in New Jersey, where I saw the next surreal scene of the day. They had set up an outdoor triage center with a tent, many cots, nurses, doctors, but no patients. It was as if after the collapse, either you died or you walked away. I finally got cell phone service, and I called home, and all I could get out was, "I'm fine," before I started crying. And Bonnie was crying at the other end, and she said, "I told the kids that she's sure Dad would leave right away and be safe." And I said, "Good thinking." I figured there'd be plenty of time to talk about how stupid I had been. And then, of course, 15 years of being reminded of that fact. I flagged down a dust-covered driver. He was going to Robert Wood Johnson Hospital for a chest x-ray, and he drove me and two women to Metuchen train station, which was halfway home for me, and Bonnie would pick me up there. When the three of us got out of his car, we didn't exchange names, we didn't exchange contact information. Instinctively, we knew there never would come a time when we would want to get together and talk about what we had just seen. The next day, Bonnie and I went out to the bluff overlooking the high-speed ferry terminal. Way off in the distance, we could see smoke still rising in lower Manhattan. Sadly, looking down at the parking lot of the ferry terminal, we saw the many cars whose owners would never be coming home. Everyone talks about the coincidences of that day, and I had my own. The father of a basketball teammate of two of our daughters was in the South Tower when the first plane hit the North Tower. He had paramedic training, so he went downstairs to see if he could lend assistance, and the second plane slammed into the offices of his firm. Second, 10 years before September 11, I was checking in to the Marriott Marquis Hotel in Times Square. And the desk clerk had a quizzical look. And I said to her, "What's up?" She said, "Might you be related to Richard Fetter, our front desk manager?" I said, "I don't think so, but if it would mean I could get a better room, that would be good." She called Richard over, we shook hands, we chatted a while, and he gave me the better room. 1 year after September 11, the New York Times wrote a retrospective piece about that day, and they talked about the heroism of Richard Fetter, who was then the resident manager of the Marriott connected to the South Tower. The Times wrote that Richard, who led the evacuation effort, was in a protected zone of the lobby when each of the towers fell. Nicks, scrapes, little bruise here and there, but no bones broken, Mr. Fetter recalled. Yet to this day, no trace has been found of Joseph Keller, 31, the executive housekeeper who had helped get scores of people out of the hotel and was just inches away from Mr. Fetter before the first collapse. The same sharp line dividing those who lived and those who died ran from the top of the building to the bottom. It was like they severed the building with scissors, said firefighter Patrick Carey. If you were on one side of the line, you were okay. If you were on the other, you were lost. A week after September 11, my office reopened. I was taking the ferry into lower Manhattan, and as we pulled in, all of us on the ferry could see Engine 4, Ladder 15 firehouse. And all the firefighters were on stools sitting out front, receiving condolences from passersby. I went to the first firefighter on the right, and I shook his hand and told him how very sorry I was. And then he said, "Oh, I'm new," and he pointed to the few firefighters who remained from before September 11. This was one of the first houses to respond, and they lost 14 of their brothers. This was the firehouse I passed every day going and coming from work, so twice a day during my 8.5 years in lower Manhattan. Sometimes I'd have to jump to avoid a firefighter's overthrown football, And on at least one occasion, a slowly backing in ladder truck blocked my way, and by the time I got to my ferry, I missed it by a few seconds, cursing, of course. It took September 11 for all of us on the ferry to put names with faces and realize that these were the people who protected us as we worked in our high-rises. It took September 11 for all of us to realize that this was our firehouse, just as everyone who lived or worked in New York City had their own firehouse, sometimes more than one. That afternoon, I retraced my exercise route while barricades stopped me a few feet away from ground zero. They could not disguise the terror within. The few buildings that were left had walls sheared off. You could look in and see desks and chairs and papers and offices where no one would be ever returning. To me, I figured this is what Europe must have looked like during World War II after all those bombing raids. But also on a brighter note, I saw the next community of heroes, the construction workers who joined fire, police, and emergency services in the recovery and cleanup effort. And the stories I heard from my coworkers were heartrending as well. My executive assistant, who had held our group together before September 11 with her kindness and warmth, good humor, spot-on efficiency, she was one of the utility group members who had been watching the North Tower when the second plane hit the South Tower. While others described that to me as if watching a video game, she shared with me that all she could think about then and thereafter were the people on that plane when it happened. It took her 2 days to get home to Central Jersey, having spent the night of September 11 with a coworker on Staten Island, and she has never returned to New York City. We also had a financial analyst in Atlanta on September 11 on business, and after the FAA stopped planes from flying, he rented a car and drove back to New York. A week later, he came into my office and shook my hand and said, "Thank you for saving my life." And I said, "What do you mean?" He shared with me that before we hired him in 1998, he had been working in the World Trade Center above the crash zone. But the stories I'll never forget relate to the firefighters up and down the line. Deputy Commissioner Bill Feehan, been there, done that. Those aren't his words. That's what the official FDNY website says about Commissioner Feehan. During his 42-year career, he served in every rank from probationary firefighter up to and including acting fire commissioner. When the South Tower came down on him, he was 71 years old. Peter Gansey Jr. had dreamed of being a firefighter since he was a teenager. By September 11, he had risen to be chief of department, the highest-ranking uniformed officer in the entire department. Of all my parents' friends, the only one happy going to work was a member of 120 Truck. I was only 16 then, but that is when I decided I wanted to be a fireman. After the South Tower fell, Chief Gansey went to the North Tower to try to evacuate firefighters, and he died in the North Tower collapse. Deputy Chief Ray Downey, his nickname was the Master of Disaster, though some firefighters just called him God. He was the person who was called when the FDNY or other fire departments faced catastrophe. His expertise had been tapped at the first World Trade Center bombing and also after the Oklahoma City bombing. On September 11, he was in charge of search and rescue, just as he had been 3 months earlier at the Father's Day fire. When asked once, "Why do you spend so much time and effort trying to find the remains of the presumed dead?" he said, it's because of the families left behind. The only way you can relieve some of their sorrow is to successfully recover the bodies of the people they loved. After the South Tower came down, Chief Downey went from the Marriott Hotel to the North Tower to try to rescue firefighters. He died when the North Tower came down. His body was not found for 8 months, 40 years after he started as a firefighter. And of course, the rank and file, rushing to the Twin Towers in fire trucks. Some of them took felt-tip pens and wrote their names or badge numbers on their arms or legs. They knew what they were getting into. Amazingly, Battalion Chief Oreo Palmer and Fire Marshal Ronald Bucca, both long-time experienced marathon runners, made it up to the 78th floor crash zone in the South Tower, and they were directing a ladder company that was coming up the stairs carrying 60 and 70 pounds of equipment on their backs. Those men got up just to the 78th floor where the crash was when the South Tower came down. Those brave men were from Ladder Company 15, the heroes I passed every day on my way to work. Sadly, their colleagues in the North Tower, due to poor radio communication, did not even know that the skyscraper next door had come down. Andy Fredericks was a 21-year FDNY veteran. He had 2 bachelor's degrees and 1 master's degree, and he used his knowledge and expertise to train other firefighters. After the Father's Day fire, Andy had written, "I never imagined that I would someday be part of such a grim scene." 3 months later, he was part of a much grimmer scene. He was high up in the North Tower rescuing people when the North Tower came down. The members of the FDNY certainly live up to the department motto every day of the year, New York's bravest. With all that had gone on by the turn of the new year, I decided it was time for a change. I accepted a seat on a utility board of directors, and I resigned my Wall Street job on April 1st, 2002. I put out a press release on a Monday morning announcing creation of my new consulting firm, Regulation Unfettered. Not that everything went smoothly. My wife was not thrilled to have me home every day, all day. But over time, we developed a 50-50 partnership, or maybe better described as a 50-50 understanding. You see, she would let me ask her, "Where are you going?" or "When are you coming back?" but not both questions. And if my business phone was ringing and I wasn't there, half the time she would answer it. Luckily, one of the calls she chose to answer was from one of the largest utilities in the entire United States. Their question: "What is the website address of Regulation Unfettered?" My wife had to stifle a laugh, but she got enough information so the next day I could hire a 16-year-old to create a website for me. And when I called that utility back, they hired me for a 4-month assignment that went on for 2.5 years. By the time that case was over, my business was established, and Bonnie and I had escaped New Jersey taxation and moved out west. But like my time in Lower Manhattan, I still have a beautiful view of the water. When I sit at my desk, several times a month, I'll see cruise liners going up to or back from Alaska, carrying thousands of passengers living out the American dream. And a few times a month, I'll see a battleship, an aircraft carrier, or a nuclear submarine motoring out to the open seas to protect that American dream. But once or twice a year, I'll look up. I won't see a cloud, and the blue will look as if it's painted on. And I'll say to myself, It's a September 11 day, and no matter how hard I try to shake it, all of these memories come rushing back. The heroism, the honor, the sacrifice, and for me, a profound feeling of sadness and loss. That's why, and I'm proud to be able to say this, I have never consciously walked by a New York City firehouse without stopping to read, reflect, and honor the names on the 9/11 plaques so prominently displayed.
We're coming right up. Division 3, lobby command to the Steelcom command post. Hey, Operations Tower 1 to 4 above Battalion 9. Battalion 9 to command post. Battalion 7, Operations Tower 1 to Battalion 9. I need you on the floor above 79. We have access stairs going up to 79. Okay. All right, I'm on my way up, Oriole. 15 OV to 15. Square 15 OV, Battalion 7, Operations Tower 1. Stuck in the elevator shaft. You're going to have to get a different elevator. We're chopping through the wall to get out. Radio lobby command with that. Tower 1. Battalion 7, ladder 15.